there is no going back from here. Take it back right now. Looks like a dinky little button band. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Big wow. Big, big wow.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for joining me for another podcast episode today, and thank you so much for understanding the little break I took last weekend. I had an unexpected weekend off from real life work, and so I just decided to take advantage of the break, and I think it was much needed and definitely led to some good progress on the projects I have around me today. So, before we get into things, I will tell you briefly what I'm wearing right now, which is an old crochet project. These are crocheted granny squares. I'll definitely pop in the photo of the whole outfit that I had made a few years ago now. But it was just a little brain project. There's no pattern. However, if you know how to make a granny square, I have full confidence that you could figure something like this out. It's basically just rectangles for the sleeves, all made in little granny squares that are then stitched together, and then a rectangle on the back, literally probably 9 granny squares all together, or maybe it was 4 across and 3 down, like something like that. And then the same thing on the fronts, just involving these little half granny squares, so granny triangles, I guess. But it's just a super, super simple project. And then everything was finished off with a row of double crochet and then just a like chain with single crochets into it to tie up the front. So it's just it's fun little cropped cardigan, and I love to pull it out this time of year for spooky season. If you have a reference for a pattern that looks like this, please by all means help me out and throw it in the comments so I at least have somewhere to point those of you who are interested in making it. And mine was made out of Lily Sugar and Cream cotton, obviously in black, and it's held up all these years. I don't wear it like the most, but when I do wear it, it feels amazing. So I can recommend the yarn. It's one of those things, if you like cotton yarn, but you feel the Lily Sugar and Cream and you think it's way too rough, like get it, wear it, break it in a little bit, and I promise you it softens up to garment worthy material. So that's what I'm wearing, and I have a few projects to tell you about today. Let's get off the bat right here. Did not work on my camisole number 7. Did not work on, let's say it together, the Stitches sweater. However, I did work on my Miles shirt jacket to the point of completion. So I have that to show you today. I have been working on my Crochet Turtle project, and I am working on my darling cardigan as well as the grand finale, most exciting thing, my first design, my Christmas cardigan. So we'll probably take it in about that order. I think without further ado, let's go ahead and dive on in. So starting with the Miles shirt jacket by Haley Smedley Ozetta. This is a shacket, as I would refer to it, which basically just means that it's designed to sort of be a shirt style jacket. In this case, that is in the form of a drop shoulder cardigan. It's knit from the top down, and the best part is it has this cozy collar on it, and it is knit out of, traditionally it's knit out of Wool Dreamers Mancholopi. However, I have been knitting mine out of Istex Plotulopi, which I naively thought was like a fair trade for Mancholopi, and I have been educated and I've learned that they're not totally the same. So we'll get into that a little bit today, but I have been working on this project for 50 days as of today, and all of the knitting is done. So let's get her on to Helena the Hang It, and then I can tell you a little bit more about where we're at and what's going on. Here she is, my Miles shirt jacket. So as you could see, it's all knit up. I also have the pockets, which are knit separately, and then I almost just said glued on, and then are sewn onto the front of this cardigan. Now, if you're smart and read ahead in this pattern, she does specifically mention that you should like kill two birds with one stone and knit your gauge swatch as one of the pockets. However, I had not done that. So I did have to knit up two separate pockets, but these were like literally a couple hours of work. They knit up so quickly. Since the main fabric of this jacket is knit on 6mm needles, and then the finishes are on 5mm needles. So I think the last time we spoke, I was like maybe most of a sleeve done. Since then, obviously, everything's been finished. So let's just touch base, catch you up to speed. I have a row gauge issue with this project, which just means that I have less rows per 4 inches than the pattern, right? I never remember how to say this. So my stitches and rows gauge, if I knit up the same amount of stitches and rows that are listed as the 4x4 inch swatch for this pattern, mine wound up being like significantly longer. My stitch gauge was fine, but my row gauge was definitely longer. So that meant that I had to do a little bit of finagling when it came to things like increasing for the collar, and then just depth of armhole stuff. So I do have just a few less rows worked in, and I just did that by, like, if it had said to increase every other row, I would just increase every row and therefore not have to knit quite as many rows, but still get the right amount of stitches on the project. So I hope that that makes sense. And then the only other place where that was going to cause me an issue was going to be at the hem, because the hem is worked to have this really lovely sort of dip up on the sides on the hips. So that's worked with the German short rows, and I didn't know if I was going to have to rework any of that math. So I figured I would just try it as per pattern, and it looks like it worked out just fine. So I didn't do anything in adjustments there. And then funny enough, when it came to the sleeves, I worked as many decreases as were stated in the pattern, and then I still just had to work a few more rows before then starting my cuff. And then I also think I just worked my cuffs the littlest bit longer than what was stated in the pattern, and I did that to try and match the amount of rows that I had in my collar. So all of those things were just, I think, little intricacies that were from my row gauge issue of kind of where I had maybe cut out some rows in the top. I needed maybe a little bit more collar to fill in the space, which meant that my cuffs had to be a little longer to match. So those were the only little discrepancies. Otherwise, everything is totally to pattern. And so once those sleeves were done, I went back and I picked up for the button band, which you could see I actually have a potential button just pinned onto the front. That might be a little helpful tip. I just attached that to the front of my cardigan so that while I was working the button placket and approaching those buttonholes, I could make sure that my button was actually going to fit through the buttonholes. So the two options I have are the same size. That was why it was there. And then I just thought it might be fun to kind of keep it to see how it looks. But yeah, you go ahead and pick up stitches for the button bands, knit the button plackets with the buttonholes and then the one without, and then stitches are picked up for the collar. And I don't know if I had realized this, but it certainly kind of surprised me when I approached it in the pattern. And that is the fact that the collar is indeed double folded. I don't know why looking at it in the photos that didn't really process for me. So it is a double folded collar, which then also means that you knit double the height of what the collar is going to be. And when you fold it over, you wind up with these gaps on the front, the folded edge. And so those actually had to be seamed together. So I did that. And I think with this yarn, it's so forgiving. I don't know how that would necessarily look if it was a more clean yarn and less fuzzy, because that definitely does help to kind of blur the edges. But I think where it's at right now looks so polished, so good. I'm really, really excited to see how this looks when it's blocked, because the final piece of this now is just the fact that this fabric, when it is not blocked, has a mind of its own. You can see it curls up on itself in every which way. All of these finishes were done with an Italian tubular sewn bind off, which just means that they're like sad right now. They're feeling a little bit stretched and tense, and they need a good bubble bath. So that's what they'll be getting tonight. And then same with the pockets. I thought it would make the most sense for me to block these things separately and then seam the pockets onto the front of the cardigan. And then I'll probably just polish it off with a steam block. But that just made the most sense to me rather than trying to sew these curly, crazy pockets onto the cardigan. And then this is the thing with the Istex Plotulopi, that apparently the Wool Dreamers Manchalopi, which is the recommended yarn for the pattern, is apparently, as I've heard from a few of you now, a lot softer and more approachable, I would suppose, as a wearable fabric. This Istex Plotulopi is not for the faint of heart. It is prickly, it is rustic. It's definitely the most rustic thing I've ever knit. I know from my swatch that that didn't change very much in the blocking process. I am, however, going to try the trick of adding some conditioner to the water when I block this time, in the hopes to soften it up a little bit. Now, just in trying on, I actually haven't had an issue with the collar rubbing on my neck. So that's a really, really good thing. That was the only thing I was concerned about. So as of right now, I'm not worried at all. Although I will say that I had Mr. Knits feeling this. I actually wanted him to feel just how lightweight it is, because that's amazing. This looks like this chunky, cozy sweater, but it weighs nothing. And that's something that I've learned over time I really care about, actually, is I don't like the feeling of a knit just weighing on me. So another reason I'm really, really excited to have this done. But I handed it to him for him to feel it, and he was like, take it back right now. He's like, I could never wear this fabric. So if you have more sensitive skin, this is not for you. But I don't think it's going to bother me, especially because it's a jacket. It's always going to be worn over top of something else, and most likely over top of a long sleeve, like just cozy cardigan jacket. So I'm so excited. I would really love your help choosing the buttons for this. I did lay out quite a few options, and I pared it down to just 2. And they're very similar. They're both this aged brass material. It's just that one is a little bit more organic looking, and then the other is a little bit more clean and polished. I'll definitely try to get a better shot of this in the B-roll, but I would love to know which one is your preference. And then we'll have to find out if we agreed, because the goal is for me to get this washed and blocked. Hopefully it's dry enough to pop on Friday morning, as I will be heading to Indie Untangled on Friday. That is the only part of my Rhinebeck weekend plans that I actually have hashed out. Everything else is still very much up in the air. So we will see where I wind up this weekend. But my goal is to wear this to Indie Untangled. And so yeah, we'll have to see if we chose the same buttons. Other than that, I think that's pretty much everything I had to say about this, other than I've really enjoyed knitting on it. I'm so excited to see it blocked, and I'm potentially, oh wait, that is another thing. If you remember back a little bit, I always knew I was going to knit this by holding 2 strands of the Plotulopi together. That was kind of my best reference from the Manchalopi thing. And I purchased the yarn for it when it was on sale. And then later on was like, wait, did I purchase enough to hold it double, or did I just purchase enough to do it single? And then when I reworked the math, I thought that I forgot to double the yarn quantity. So I went ahead and ordered another 7 plates of this yarn. Well, I literally finished the whole thing minus half of a cuff with 6 plates of yarn. So all I had to do with my 7th plate was the 2 pockets and then finishing that cuff, which was great. So I did all of that. I wound up leaving the project on my bed where I was working on it. And later on, I came back to such a surprise. That 7th plate of yarn, which literally was pristine, perfect condition, now looked like this. I walked away from the plate of yarn, and it's very satisfying if you've ever opened one of these plates of unspun yarn. Like, they're just perfect and dense little pucks. And I remembered thinking that it was nice to kind of still see the puck left behind when I left it. And this has a very sheepy, natural smell to it. And I think Osie is very attracted to that. I've found her kind of cuddled up on my cardigan a few times. But I guess this time she took it to the next level, and she massacred this plate of yarn. And not just like a normal ball of yarn where she could whip it around and then it's mangled, but I could untangle it. This, she must have like literally just scratched it. So she tore the plate of yarn like into pizza slices. And so I have all of these little like 8-inch scraps of yarn. And I did still have one full pocket to finish. So I was like trying to find the biggest clumps of yarn that seemed the least destroyed and use those. But there is no going back from here. My best thought right now is to just hang on to this and use it to stuff any more little stuffies that I might be making for my niece who's on the way. But this is your note to not leave your plates of Plotalopi out for your dog, because apparently it was very attractive to her. And now I don't have my 7th plate of yarn anymore, but I do have 7 fully untouched plates of yarn. And right now I'm a little bit torn on what to do with them, because when I thought I still had this whole plate left, I did have a thought to maybe make a sort of matching hooded scarf, probably just a modified version of the Jose hood that I made last year, to pair with this and therefore be able to have like a hooded option. But now that I don't have that last plate, I'm kind of feeling weird about tapping into a whole brand new plate of yarn when I could sell those 7 plates as a full sweaters quantity. I don't know. Obviously, you could probably make a smaller sweater with 6 of the plates or however many left I would have after a hood. But that one hurt a little bit. I was pretty disappointed with little Miss Osie. So that's my advice this week. Don't leave your unspun yarn out for your dog to destroy. At least I have 7 backups. So yeah, that's everything on the Miles shirt jacket. You can definitely tell I haven't filmed in a little bit because I'm apparently feeling chatty. But in the next podcast episode, I'll definitely have the full finished object breakdown for you, and hopefully some photos of me wearing this at Indie Untangled. All right, let's do a little quickie. Next, we could chat about my Crochet Turtle project, which is a project that I am making in combination with all of the ladies now in my family. I'm so excited to be doing this. And so I've been putting in a little bit of homework on the components that I needed to in order to send out a few kits to the people who don't live in the area. And I'm glad I took the time to do it because I ran into a couple hiccups with my last update on this. So for a reference, the last time you saw one of these hexagons, it looked like this. And now they're actually going to look like this. Pretty significant difference, but basically I have my reference doodle here where I just kind of got an idea of how many colors I wanted to use and the layout of how I could do that with no colors, none of the same colors touching each other. And then I worked up a few of the hexagons in this size and did some math to figure out basically how many rows I would need to get a baby mat-sized turtle. And it was going to be a lot more than the rows I accounted for in my doodle. So I had to make a choice. Did I want my colors to be in contact with each other anytime? Did I want to involve more colors? No. So I decided I would just make the hexagons as big as I needed to only have that many hexagons on the back of the shell, and that was going to be the solution. So I also, the last time I saw you, only had 3 colors for the shell, and that was the blue, the purple, and the pink, and so I added the 4th color, which wound up being this mint green, and I'm really happy with it. So I increased the amount of rounds I did in the hexagon, and then I also added a 2nd row in the white color, and that was just, it looked more proportionate to the now more rows of main color. So the idea is that everyone, all of the ladies, they're each going to crochet 1 hexagon, and most of them have little to no experience crocheting. So I'm actually having them just make the inside part, and then I'm going to come back and add all of the white borders, and then I'm going to seam them all together like that. I've never done the join as you go method on any of my granny square projects. I basically have always just made sure that my outside border is the same color across the squares or hexagons that I'm joining. And then I will take them right side to right side and just single crochet across the back. So I get a little ridge of a seam and then unfold them. And it eats a tiny bit of the margin of the outside, but it makes for a really quick, simple, easy peasy project for me personally. I've gone ahead and done 2 hexagons in each of the colors, and then the center of the turtle has the mint green, and then this is also going to be the half hexagons around the edges, so I still have to do those. But then my family is going to be helping me make the rest of the hexagons. I've already sent out a couple of kits. I have some of them helping me do the belly hexagons, which are in the sage green color. And then basically what I've been doing is just weighing each hexagon, and the different colors, they are kind of made up of 2 different yarns. So I have been doing them individually just by color to make sure that I get this as close to right as possible with a little bit of wiggle room. But let's say that this weighed 20 grams. I then weighed out 20 grams of the same yarn and caked that up so that each participant can have their own little cake of yarn. And basically between this kind of rationing how much yarn each person has, and then my plan to add the white myself at the end, I'm trying to leave little room for major errors in gauge and just consistency. So my thought is, if you can't crochet the yarn, if you can't crochet the hexagon with the amount of yarn that I've given you, because I've given you a little bit of wiggle room, then it's just absolutely not going to work. It's way off gauge, and that'll be a problem. And then likewise, when I get each person's regular hexagon and I add the white border to it, I'll have a little room to kind of snug up the edges or stretch them out a little if I have to. And so that's kind of my insurance policy, to make sure that each different crocheter's hexagons all fit together, I hope. And then it's on me to make the rest of the body and everything. So that's where we're at with this project. I did also pick up some of the stuffing and the lining fabric. So I'm going to be basically sewing a just circular cushion to go on the inside of the turtle. I'll be stuffing that. I'll be attaching all the hexagons together, and I'll be adding a border and then the fins and the head and everything. And so there's kind of a lot more to do, but first I need all of these hexagons, and the kits I've sent out have now reached their destination. So hopefully I'll have those back in the next couple of weeks. And then in a couple of weeks from today, I'm actually meeting up with the rest of my more local family to give them, we're going to do a crochet class. So I hope you guys are ready. I'm going to try to be as prepared as possible. But that's where we're at with this turtle project. And I guess that was an acquisition. I bought the mint yarn for that. All right, next project, let's touch base super quickly on my darling cardigan by Veronica Lindbergh Kutova Kika. Perfect segue because that will be a gift for my sister at her baby shower, and I'm planning to wear this cardigan to the baby shower. So I'm knitting this out of KNC Cloud Paca. It's a blown yarn in the cotton candy colorway. And I finished this cardigan, had a little bit of an issue with the double knit button band. So I ripped that out as well as some of the length of the cardigan. You guys would have seen that in the last podcast. So let me just show you where we're at right now. All right, here she is. This cardigan has been on my needles for 77 days today, and that's from cast on to fully blocked to cutting off the bottom, ripping it out, all of those things. So where we're at right now is I actually made it my mission this morning to just finish the button band, at least to the point where the buttonholes were done. The changes I've made to this pattern, and since ripping out the first finished version of it, was I added some short rows in the back to get the back of mine to drop a little bit because I was having a funny little fit issue there. And then I also have added more stitches to the double knit button band. I actually have the button band sitting next to me here. I've basically gone ahead and I added 4 stitches to my cast on for the double knit button band, which kind of appears as 2 additional stitches on the front. And that was because I really did feel like this just looked a little bit dinky. Looks like a dinky little button band. I think I just like a chunkier button band, although I'll contradict that in a little bit with my next project. But I just thought that the proportions looked a little off to me. And then I also had realized that the buttons that I really wanted to use were just a little bit too big for that button band. So I wound up deciding on how many stitches to cast on by literally just holding this up against the stockinette fabric of the body. And I counted how many stitches it would take to fit like behind this button, with knowing that I'm working the double knit button band on a smaller needle than I did the body. So there's a little wiggle room in there. But ultimately, I decided on just adding those 4 additional stitches to the cast on, and I think that's going to be the perfect width without going too big, since I'm pretty dead set on using these buttons. The other thing is that this time I fully committed to doing the petite knit. I feel like I'm going to mess this up. Is it Kimmy Monkholm or something like that? Her tutorial for buttonholes on a double knit button band without cutting the yarn. That was the official method that I used to make these buttonholes. And I'll tell you what, I'll never do it the other way again. It's so simple to make these buttonholes. You don't have to cut your yarn. There's less ends to weave in. It's just a lot easier. And so if you've been intimidated by that idea, please don't be. I'll try to remember to link the video in the description and remind me if you need it, and I didn't, because I had a little bit of a hard time figuring out which one it was. But that was the method that I had used. I will tell you that my first buttonhole I accidentally made just a little bit too close to the edge. I like forgot a stitch in the first half, but I didn't think it really mattered. I don't think you could really tell, so it didn't bug me enough to go back and fix it. And so all I have left to do now is just work my way around the rest of the button band. Now, the one thing that I found out by accident from ripping off the button band in my first completed version of this was that my row gauge in the double knitting was just pretty significantly shorter than it was in the rest of my stockinette fabric. And so my goal is that I've overcompensated enough in knitting the length of this cardigan a little longer than I wanted it to be, so that when it does inevitably shrink up from the double knit button band, it's the length I want it to be. And then I also just made it a point to pick up every stitch along the way. I didn't skip any stitches when it came to picking up. So hopefully that means that there won't be a discrepancy there anymore. And yeah, I just have to finish the double knit button bands, and I'll try not to put that off too much. But my deadline, I want to be wearing this the first weekend or the second weekend in November. So I have a little time. I'm planning to bring it to a fun knit night I'm going to tomorrow. So yeah, that's where we're at with the darling cardigan. Actually, before I fully take this off of Helena, I have to tell you a little sad update on my needles. So I use the Knitter's Pride. Are they called the carbons? They're not called the carbons. They're the metal Knitter's Pride needles. I love them so much. They're my favorite needles. I would not ever like splurge on ChiaoGoo. They're just not my preferred material. I like the slipperiness of these needles, and I just don't like the cords. So I invested in a few extra cords that are the also Knitter's Pride mindful cords, and that just means that they have a swivel to them, and I've loved them so much. So much so I actually plan to completely wipe out the original cords that came with my needles and just have mindful cords. However, now I have a little bit of hesitation because I actually had one break. So the component that actually swivels on the tip of the cord, it literally snapped off. I was in the middle of a project and I was getting a lot of just like catching when I was moving my stitches over. Couldn't figure out what was going on. And then all of a sudden I saw that this was like hanging on by a thread. So I don't know if this is just a one-off thing. I know that a couple of these cords I've been kind of hard on as far as having really heavy sweaters on them and like really maneuvering them quite a bit and pulling on them quite hard. So it's very possible that this was user error. However, if it happens again and again, I'm going to be kind of sad. So I do want to know if you have another brand that is compatible for a swivel cord with your Knitter's Pride needles. Or I don't know. I'm open to your recommendations, and I'll keep you posted as far as the rest of my cords. It's just really sad to me that this is now garbage when this was one of my most used lengths. So I need replacements, but I'm also hesitant to purchase more. So that was just a little update I wanted to give you guys on my tools. So sad. All right, now let's get to the best part. Why don't we? I have been working on my first design. It is my Christmas cardigan, though I feel like I should mention, I don't know that I have yet. My intention is to finish knitting this as my Christmas cardigan, and then I'll probably cast on a second one that doesn't actually have the Christmas motifs on it. So it will just be a normal cardigan pattern. That's probably how I'll release it as an actual pattern whenever I get to that. But maybe I'll include just like a free copy of the Christmas color work or something. So I feel like I should mention that because I don't know if I have yet. But this is my first ever knit design, and it's a doozy. It's a lot of fun. I am enjoying the process more than I ever thought I would. So that feels really good. However, I have yet to try it on. So I feel like we should do that today, right? Okay. You guys haven't seen this since it's actually turned into a cardigan. It's turned into something I can try on today. It is a saddle shoulder top-down construction. I'm knitting the main body of this in Knit Picks Wool of the Andes worsted in the Oyster Heather colorway. And then the rest of the colors, all of the color work, are pretty much yarns that were in my stash or leftover scraps from other projects. So I will get her onto Helena and you can take a peek at where we're at. Last podcast, I showed off the little saddle shoulder swatch that I had made, and I do just want to say, like, the biggest thank you. I was actually overwhelmed reading the feedback. I couldn't even process it yet. So I have to go back to the comments because I've read them, but I haven't responded. I was just overwhelmed by the kind words that you guys all had and the encouragement. And I didn't know, I felt very silly, like harping on this little tiny thing, but the way that you guys were receptive to it, melted me. You guys melted me. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm an excited, happy girl. Let me show you this cardigan. Here she is. Obviously, you're looking at the back of this because I wanted to give you an opportunity to try and guess what the color work's gonna be on the front. And before I show you, I just want to acknowledge all of these little dangly bits. So this is my first time knitting intarsia color work. And it's not for the faint of heart. It's not difficult. It's just yarn management is the tricky thing. So that's what you are seeing down here. And so this also means that I've made the choice to really simplify my original color work chart that I had made so that I'm working with like large blocks of color, and then I will go back when I'm done and add the details back in with duplicate stitch and embroidery and things like that. So I don't know if you're going to understand what you're looking at because you don't know the final vision just yet, but I can tell you it looks really good. I'm so excited. Okay, so this is the back. I'll show you the front and then I'll tell you more about the construction. Dun, 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 dun. Is this not the cutest thing literally ever? We can ignore the other side and just appreciate this one right now. How precious is this? I would hope, I really do hope that you know what you're looking at before I say it, but I will say it. This is our little OC. And she's obviously helping to decorate the Christmas tree. I'll tell you right now, we're about a third of the way done with the actual color work. Well, with the body of the sweater, there's a little dead space at the bottom to account for a hem. So we're probably actually close to the halfway point of the color work itself. And so let's just take a moment for this side. So obviously here's our little OC bear. I have been knitting her out of the yarn that from the moment I got it, it was OC yarn. And that was left over from my Artemisia sweater, which was a test knit for Emma's Knits. And it is the mohair by DK boucle yarn. I think it's the chestnut colorway. And I've just been holding that with a strand of Knitting for Olive merino in the colorway brown nougat. That's left over from my Azucena pullover by Claudia Quintanilla. And I added the Knitting for Olive just to make sure, first of all, that she was nice and dense and not sheer at all, because the boucle, it fills out a lot of space, but it also then leaves a lot of space because it's just like loopy and leaves little holes and gaps behind. So I thought that adding the lighter color of the Knitting for Olive would give her also a little bit of levity so she wasn't so dark on the background of the yarn. And it's literally like, it looks like her. Then for the have you ever seen someone so excited talking about their knitwear? I'm literally getting teary-eyed just sharing this with you because I'm so excited about it. And I'm so pleased with how it's turning out. So the Christmas tree. The Christmas tree is being knit out of 2 strands of yarn. One I bought for the tree specifically, and that was Knit Picks palette in a green colorway. And then I'm holding it with a strand of thrifted Sandness Garn Tin Silk mohair. And the mohair is just a little less saturated and a little bit lighter than the bright green punchy palette. So that's adding a little variation to kind of make it more dimensional. And I also just like that that was fuzzy to sort of emulate it being an actual tree on the plain background. Okay, now let's shift over to the other side of the cardigan, which is just less exciting because it's not my dog. But on its own, it's so cute. So here we have, can you tell what's going on? It's also a little more scrunched up because I've also done a little bit of stranded color work on this half, just because I had a little less room between some of the sections. It made more sense. I don't know if I'll regret that in the long run or not, but for a fun, just kitschy cardigan, I'm okay with it. So we have here the window with the moon inside of it, and then the and the window was knit out of some of the leftover Valley Yarns Southampton, I think it's called, that I knit my dad's Savin sweater out of this year. The moon is Wool of the Andes worsted by Knit Picks in I think the colorway is called Cloud. I'm using that for my Texo sweater that I plan to knit at some point, but have the yarn for, and it was just that perfect moon color because it has a little bit more warmth to it. And then the garland is the same combo that you see on the tree with just one extra strand of the mohair in there to make it extra fluffy and fuzzy. Then underneath that and where we're at right now, you can see that I have just most of these stockings hanging from the garland. And for the white part of the top of like the fur of this stocking, I used some thrifted boucle yarn that I had used in my Like pullover by Sari Nordland. And then holding that with two strands actually of Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair, also left over from my Artemisia sweater. And then the stockings themselves are knit out of a strand of red thrifted yarn and then a strand of the leftover brushed alpaca silk from last 2 years ago Christmas dress. So that's where we're at right now. These are going to have a lot more detail added to them. I'm even considering adding some more like three-dimensional, maybe beaded elements to just make it, I don't want it to necessarily be an ugly Christmas sweater, but I do really like an over-the-top Christmas sweater. So I want it to be so cute and a little tacky, yes, but also just like, it's beautiful. I love it so much. So I think because we're in cardigan season, apparently, I'm not going to transfer all of these stitches onto some try-it-on tubing. I just want to make sure that my armhole depth is right. And so I'm going to just add a cord extender to my needles here and just make this cord that much longer so I can try it on for you for the first time, my first design. So exciting. Before I do, the construction was that I started with my saddle shoulder, and that is what this little swatch was, I'm calling it my Christmas cookies. And so I made those two panels. It started with me casting on, making the saddle shoulders kind of off of that cast on, then going ahead and picking up stitches across the back of the saddle shoulders, joining that with the rest of my cast on stitches, and then I worked German short rows to raise the back of the neck here and give the saddle shoulders a little bit of a slant so that they weren't just sitting totally straight. They are going to be sitting right on my shoulder, and so I wanted them to drop down a little bit. And then the look of this is going to be somewhere between a set-in sleeve and a drop shoulder construction. I'm going pretty boxy, so it doesn't necessarily need to be like a full set-in sleeve, but it is going to just kind of drop off the shoulder a little bit, not so dramatic. And once I had done the back down to the armhole depth, that was when I picked up the stitches on the front of the saddle shoulders and worked them each individually until they reached the depth of the armhole, at which point I joined it all, not in the round, but flat. So I'm working just fully back and forth across the two color work charts. That's been the only little tricky thing. But I've kind of made my life easier by adding a stitch marker just where the chart starts. So I know I just knit straight across the back in the oyster heather. And then I just have to look at the charts when it comes time for those actual front panels. I think the hardest part was doing it while I was at the same time increasing for the V-neck edge of this. So that was the only kind of like, there was a lot going on, but I'm officially past all of that. So it feels like a really good time to try it on. The other thing is, this is a note I'm making for myself for my second version, which will just be a regular version without the color work. And that is that I want to change the edge of my saddle shoulder design. Right now, it ends with the purl stitches, which are going to look really nice because this is going to continue down the sleeve. And so when they're just next to the straight stockinette stitch, I thought that that would look really nice, but I'm not crazy about how it looks when it's meeting the stockinette going the opposite way, so like perpendicular to the saddle shoulder. I feel like the transition from purl stitch to stockinette just looks a little bit funny and unresolved, and so I would just switch that one thing with my next version, but didn't care about it enough to change it up here. I think it looks totally fine. You're not looking at that with this version. So, all right, I'm gonna get this moved over and then we'll chat. I suppose it will take me a second to move this over, so we could do a sort of modified try it on too big and chat while we do that. So yeah, vibes. I'm just gonna use the cord extenders that come with my needle set to make this cord longer. Usually when I'm trying on a full like pull over garment, I like to put it on to try it on tubing, so I could like actually stretch it over my body and head and everything. With the cables, you don't really get enough wiggle room. And so that's one reason I like to do that. I also like to do it because I like to see how that garment is laying, and I don't necessarily like to see it with the cable on, kind of holding it all suspended over my body. But being that this is a cardigan, it's just a little bit different. So we can definitely just do this quicker method here. I also will note that I didn't write down how long I've been working on this project for. I just kind of don't want that number looming over me. And so I have my start date. I know that I started working on this, but I'm going to refrain from mentioning it each week just in case I reach a hiccup. I don't want it to feel like, oh, there we go. Now we have to, it's been on the needles that much longer. I think I'll be more interested with this one to just look back and see how long did it actually take from beginning to end. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of doing there. I will tell you, while I would say it's been really smooth sailing for a first design, first time figuring out knitwear at all, I think it's been going really, really smoothly. However, that doesn't mean that I've just cast on and it's like worked out this first time round. I have ripped this thing out so many times, which is part of why I felt like I just wanted to take a minute to like stay absorbed in it. Last week when I finally hit my groove, I was like, I don't want to sit and film a video right now and then have to edit that. I want to be zeroed in on this project. And it's also been something that it's a different process than it is following someone else's pattern. When something doesn't work, you just have to say, yeah, it didn't work. You never did it before. So, all right, rip it out, do it again. And that happened with the cast on, with the saddle shoulder direction. I knit one like upside down and backwards. So I had to rip that fully out and redo that, which is a little frustrating, but it was just part of the process. The German short rows, I did all wonky and backwards, and I had to literally sit and draw it out like, okay, if I knit this way and then this way, which way will I wind up? So I did that 3 times, and then picking up stitch. I mean, it's been an ordeal, but it's been a fun one that I really enjoyed. And I will say, for as fussy as the Intarsia bobbins are, which I just picked mine up on Amazon, the one nice thing about the Intarsia is that it makes your project super portable, just because you don't have a ball of yarn that you're tied down to at all times. You just have all these little chunks of yarn. The only place I've actually had a ball of yarn, which doesn't look much like anything right now, is for the back panel. I've kind of had like one large bobbin, if you will, that's just been making up the whole back of the cardigan. So that's kind of how I've been dealing with that. It gets tangled, it's a mess. But I'm fine with it. It hasn't hindered me from wanting to work on it at all. And I also think that that's in large part because I did simplify the pattern as far as the images go in the color work, like I said, so that I could just do duplicate stitch when I'm done and add in little details. Before that, I was going to be holding even more colors than I am right now in a row. So that was something that kind of helped to simplify things. Okay. Let's end our try it on tubing and chat. I'm a little nervous because I have not tried it on yet. So here goes nothing. I don't think this could be more perfect. To say that I am impressed with myself right now might be an understatement. And I'm going to give myself full permission to just say, like, wow, this is actually going so well. Wow. Obviously, we're looking at an unblocked cardigan, and so it's a little scrunched up in some places, but even still, I mean, it's really not that bad at all. I think that the armhole depth is stellar. I wanted it to be, it's obviously supposed to be an oversized cardigan, so I think the ease we're looking at right now, I'm super, super happy with. I also wanted to make sure that the color work itself was really sitting on the fronts of this cardigan, and that I did even have a little extra positive ease to make sure that the sides were then kind of falling straight down and not feeling like they had to turn around my body, because I want you to be able to see the whole motif. So the idea is that this will be a very boxy, oversized cardigan. And I want to be able to wear it, maybe take away from a little bit of the comedy of it by wearing it maybe just over like a lacy bralette with like a skirt or something to make it a little more va-va-voom with silly kitschy figures on it. And then also to just be able to wear it over a turtleneck or a t-shirt or something to really make it a truly festive cardigan. So I couldn't be more thrilled right now. Could not be more thrilled. The back of the neck, everything's feeling really lovely the way it's kind of fitting over my shoulders and everything. I think that the saddle shoulder is sitting in just the right spot. I was kind of pulling it down because I was trying to show you where the V-neck ended. So I went for a rather plunging V-neck with the knowledge that this is going to have a double knit button band on it. That's what I'm thinking at the moment. Now, this is where I said I was going to contradict myself earlier, because for this cardigan, I am planning to just keep the button band a little bit more narrow. In fact, I kind of like the width of the button band on the original Darling cardigan for this. I think that that would look quite balanced, and I didn't want my front motifs to be too far away from each other. I wanted them to have a nice harmony. So I'm also even considering doing like an I-cord button band or something. That's a thought. But overall, right now, I am thrilled. Thrilled. It's just perfect. Pah. The one thing I really felt like I didn't know what the heck I was doing when I got there was the kind of like armhole increases and then casting on stitches under the arms. So that was kind of just some trial and error, and I feel like it's literally panned out. I mean, perfectly. It's perfect. I'm so excited. I think that this is gonna be exactly what I wanted it to be. I couldn't be more thrilled right now. Could not be. I have no words. I'm done. I'm done. That's it. Goodbye. I'll see you next week. I'll just be sitting here in this till then. I think the colors are just so fun too. They're so festive. I don't know. What do you guys think? You see the vision? You like it? We're happy? We like our Italian cookies? I did also think for a second that it would make for a fun little vest. But no, with the saddle shoulder, I really want to see that continue down the whole sleeve here. Use your imagination once that's coming down the sleeve and then the sleeves, and it's going to just be so cute. I'm so excited. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Big wow. Big, big wow. All right, let me take it off. So the camera actually was about to die. I just plugged it in and took a second. I literally didn't even want to take this off. I sent some pictures out to my family, and I'm just so overjoyed with how this is turning out. Now, upon looking at it through the camera, I feel like Osie is looking like a little dinosaur right now. So I need you guys to just trust me and trust the process, that once I've come back with all of the little details, I mean, like the window and everything it needs, window panes and, maybe something fun on the moon and all of those little things, I need you to trust me that it's just going to bring this to life. But it just looks so good. It looks like exactly what I wanted it to. And literally, I couldn't be more proud of myself. So that's where we're at with the Christmas cardigan. I'm going to have to sit on my hands to not work on this instead of editing this video. But that's where we're at. Like, I'm in this very, this is the sort of blissful part, I think, right? Once I get to the part where I'm trying to grade this and go through numbers, I'm going to be so psyched out. But this is the part that's just absolute bliss when it's all finally coming together. No more words. That's my Christmas cardigan. All right, those are all of the projects. I do have a little acquisition here. Well, two, I guess. The first one is that when I went for the fourth color of the turtle, the yarn at Michael's was buy one, get one half off. And I've always seen this ball of yarn there. And I've just always been attracted to it, but I never had a reason to get it before. And so I grabbed it this time because I just thought it would make for a perfect little baby knit. So just a ball was all I needed. This is Loops and Threads Flex. It's an acrylic blend yarn. So let's see, it's 79% acrylic, 21% polyester. And it's just this pretty little, it looks like a very loose ply yarn in this baby pink color. And it has little flecks of white, yellow, blue, like a little lavendery. It's just perfect like baby yarn. So I thought that I would whip this up into maybe another little sweater or something else for baby, which also reminds me, I had finished my little baby sweater last podcast too, and there was a comment saying I needed to knit some bell-bottom pants to go with it. And I thought, you're right, I do need to do that. So you can expect a pair of baby bell-bottom pants in the not too distant future. But then the really exciting acquisition is yarn and a pattern that were gifted to me by none other than Veronica Lindberg and the brand Novita. And I don't know why there's something very exciting about this particular collaboration that, first of all, we have a Finnish designer and a Finnish yarn brand. And if you don't know, I'm actually Finnish. And it's so cool to be able to like connect with that side of myself that I don't typically get a chance to connect with in such a way that, I mean, I just never could have imagined that I would be in this position. So that's so cool. So I don't know if you guys have seen, but Novita has collaborated with Lina, and together, I guess they've come out with this collection of yarns, and it's called their signature collection. Within that, they've also had Veronica Lindberg Kutova Kika design a couple of patterns using this yarn. And so when they reached out to see if I wanted to join in on the fun of making one of these patterns, and I saw Kika's design, I was just overjoyed. And when this package came in, even more excited. So look at this. I've already opened this box, but I did just keep it here because the presentation is just so beautiful. It is just nice when you're investing in like good quality yarn and it comes in a really nice presentation and not just like a random mailer bag. I don't know if you care about that. I think it's kind of nice. It's not necessary. Obviously, we'll enjoy the yarn either way, but I do think that the presentation is particularly fun. Now, of course, this was gifted by Novita, so I did not pay for this yarn, but I am equally as excited to use it. And then you open the box and you get just this beautiful presentation. There was like a lovely sticker on the tissue paper and everything. But yeah, in the lookbook, so they have the Novita with the Lina and Novita signature collection. And then it says Slow Fashion Designs by Jana Helen, Kutova Kika, Colibri by Johanna, and Novita Design Team, and then just a few little cards. So I'm going to be knitting the Nomad sweater by Veronica Lindberg. Of course, I'll put it on the screen here, but I just saw this and I loved the simplicity of the design, and yet the blanket stitch detail on the edge is just enough for me to like, yeah, I do want to knit that. And the sample was knit in this really lovely, actually the color is almost very similar to my Christmas cardigan with black edging. And my first thought, of course, was to go very neutral with this. But when I was looking at the colors of the yarn that they were offering, there was one that just kind of stole my heart. And I thought for a simple sweater, it would be so perfect. How pretty is that? Isn't that just nice? I don't know. It's just very satisfying to me. So this is the color that I chose. This is the Novita Helene. It's extra fine merino wool, silk, and super kid mohair. And I'll give you the breakdown. It's 60% wool, 30% silk, and 10% mohair. So soft. It's so beautiful. It feels delicious. I have already swatched, and the color that I chose, I think that this was called Lipstick. I don't know if the name is on here, but I think that the color I chose was Lipstick. So it's this gorgeous like deep berry color. And my first thought was for the blanket stitch to go neutral. I thought maybe black or beige or white or something like that, but it was actually next to this other color in the lineup online. And I was just like, you know what? Let me think about, when am I wearing this color? And for the most part, it would be with just like jeans. The shoes I would wear would probably be neutral. And so I didn't feel like I had to tie in a neutral. I thought that I could go out on a limb and maybe have a little bit of fun. And so I chose this as my accent color, the little detail blanket stitch. And together, I just think that they actually make this really fun. It's an unexpected little punchy pop, and I thought an outfit of the sweater and mostly this color with just those little tiny accent details and this, and then with a pair of like blue jeans and then my cheetah print clogs, I thought that would just be really fun to wear. And the risk felt pretty minimal, since if I didn't love the way that this looked on here, I have so many other little random scraps of yarn that I could still just use, I think, a black yarn to do the edging if I didn't love the way that this looked. But I just thought that they looked really fun together, and it would be so different. It would just be really different from anything else. So I'm so excited about this. And I also chose this specifically. This is my little swatch that I have to block today too, but I don't have a lot of simple sweaters on my queue. And when I saw this with just that little detail, I was like, perfect. I do need a just simple sweater to cast on, and so this will be the one. I'm very excited about it. So that was my really big, very fun acquisition. Thanks so much to Novita and Kika for thinking of me. I'm like overjoyed. It's a good day, you guys. I'm just really happy to play with some beautiful yarns and be able to participate in this. I don't know if it's actually a knit along or something, but just to make one of these gorgeous sweaters. Well, if that didn't show why I should never take a week off, I don't know what will. Thank you for putting up with my chatting today. And thanks just so much for joining me here every week. If you're going to Rhinebeck, I hope that you have a great time. I will one more time just mention that if you're, in the area and on the fence about going, I would recommend maybe checking out one or two of the videos that I've already shared kind of my views on Rhinebeck in the past. And who knows where the heck I'm going to wind up this weekend. So maybe I'll see you there, or maybe not. We'll see. That's all I have for you today, guys. If you enjoyed this video, I would definitely appreciate it if you would just go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you subscribe and you ring the bell, then you're going to be notified anytime I post a new video. However, you can usually expect a new video on Saturday mornings at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And with that, a big ol' thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. All right, you guys. Bye.
Bye! Oh, see, I don't think we're on the farm anymore.